Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today I'm going to bring you partially the biggest books on my shelf, but Mammoth books, an entire list of Mammoth books spanning from A to Z in the alphabet. And all of these books are going to be over 800 pages. So if, like me, you like a good long read, well, then I've got a whole bunch for you. And I titled this video More Mammoth Books because last year I posted a very similar video, and I will link it in the description box below if you want to go back and see that. And I have tried to make sure that these lists don't have books that overlap. I am, for the most part, talking just about books that I own. So there were a couple of letters where I only still own the same books that were on last year's list, but I will try and fill that in with maybe books that I don't own. Anyway, let's get going because there's quite a few books to go through. So starting with the letter A, I'm going to talk about Atlas Shrugged real quickly. This book comes in at 1,168 pages in the edition that I have, and is probably the book on my shelves that I get the most negative feedback about in terms of people just saying it's not worth your time, just move on. But that really just makes me want to read it more just to see why people cannot stand this book. I have heard that it is very divisive, and partially because the whole premise of the book is, I guess, in some ways just promoting individualism over everything else in life, which does sound pretty negative, so I can understand that if that is the case. It's a really long book. This will actually be a reread for me when I get to it, though I recall absolutely nothing about my first reading of it, so maybe that's appropriate. So for the letter B, I'm going to go with a book that I don't own, Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, and I'm looking down where I have it written. And this is a work of Russian literature. It is nonfiction, and it covers teachings or philosophy by the author of the novel, whose name I will put on the screen. And it is described as being an ocean of stories. So apparently, the author uses a variety of different means and techniques to communicate his ideas on how to live life. And he discusses in large the human experience, the human dilemma, and human possibility. And this all sounds very fascinating to me. Last year, I had quite a few people leave comments suggesting this as a book to add to my TBR list, and so I did. For the letter C, I have Clarissa by Samuel Richardson. This is a book that I'm actually in the middle of reading and is 1,499 pages long. I didn't mention, but Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson is 1,135 pages long. But Clarissa is also a reread for me. I have just started it in January, and it is an epistolary novel, so the entire book is written in the form of letters from Clarissa, mainly to her bestie Anne Howe, and describes her turmoil that she goes through as her parents try to marry her off to someone she can't stand, and how that just all falls apart, and yeah, her adventures that ensue thereafter. For the letter D, I have a recent purchase that's been on my TBR for a while, and that is Divine Days by Leon Forrest. This is 1,140 pages, though it seems way longer than that. I don't know why. But this is described as being the war and peace of African American literature. So, yeah, you had me at hello. It tells the story of Gilbert as he goes around just 1 week in his life as a playwright trying to run some errands for his aunt, meeting a whole host of people. Clearly, you've got to meet a lot of people during that time, if it's going to take this much time. And this must be every single minute of every day for that 1 week because it's a long book, but I'm really looking forward to it. At 824 pages for the letter E, I have Ember Blade. This is by Chris Wooding, and I believe is now the first book in a series, but at the time I purchased this, it was still a standalone novel. This is a work of fantasy, and it is sort of an adventure or quest style fantasy. This is supposed to be a really good book for people who are fans of The Lord of the Ring, very similar quest type of fantasy. At 850 pages, I have The Forsyte Saga by John Galsworthy, and this is a book that covers the story of a gentleman who is outliving the Victorian age. It occurs at the end of the 18th century, beginning of 19th century in England, and so is right on the edge of Victorian versus Edwardian period, I believe. And he is trying to romance his very uninterested wife. And this book is actually made up of 3 books that make the entire Forsyte saga. For the letter G, I have a book that comes in at 1,279 pages, and that is Golden Lotus. Frequently, you can find this book in multiple volumes. In this case, it is bound up in one, as it is just one story. And this tells the story of a unscrupulous merchant who takes a beautiful and ambitious wife as his 5th wife. She, however, is not having it and decides to use sex as a weapon in their relationship. I am really looking forward to getting to this book, hopefully this month. I don't know, we'll see. Moving right along, I have at 836 pages, He Knew He Was Right by Anthony Trollope. And this is a book that I don't actually know that much about, other than that it is one of the few standalone novels that Anthony Trollope wrote. I mean, not that few. He wrote a lot, but he also wrote 2 very long series. This, however, is a standalone novel. I believe it is about a husband and wife where the husband is convinced that the wife is having an affair. I'm gonna guess that's not the case, but we'll see how it goes when I get to it. At 1,030 pages, I have the instructions by Adam Levin. This is a one book, but I happen to have it in 2 volumes. And I should mention, I have counted it if the book is over 800 pages, but just happens to be broken apart into 2 volumes. And so that would include this book. This is a book that's been on my TBR for quite a while. It tells a story of a young boy who is going to school and then gets kicked out of it, and then I think takes over an entire another school. I don't totally understand the entire concept of the book, but it sounds like it's pretty insane, and I definitely want to give it a try. I have Jerusalem by Alan Moore. I have heard that this is a very trippy, psychedelic kind of feeling fantasy novel that just kind of incorporates all the things. So definitely want to try this one. Moving back to more Russian literature, I have the Karamazov brothers, and I mentioned that when I was at B that I could have used the brothers Karamazov, which is how the title is often rendered in English, but it should technically be the Karamazov brothers, because that is how we would say it in English. But as it's been translated over time, just translating it as the brother Karamazovs has been more popular. That's actually similar to how it is said in Russian. Anyway, regardless, if I read this edition, it would count as K. This tells the story of, I think it's 3 or 4 brothers. I have not read any Dostoevsky, and this is one of the top 2 that I would potentially like to try and start with. I do like Russian literature. I like how they tell their stories, so I am excited to at some point pick this up. I would be remiss if I did not include Charles Dickens on this list, as he's notorious for writing a really long story, and I tend to really like them. So at 860 pages, I am going to include A Little Dorrit. And this is a work that tells the story of a young woman named Dorrit, whose father, I believe, is in debtor's prison, and she and her family live there with him, or maybe it's just she and him there. I don't really recall how big the family is. But this is Charles Dickens' commentary, not just on the London poor, but on debtor's prison and the legal system in London at the time. And yeah, I really enjoy the way he explores class and justice issues and social justice issues in Victorian England. And yeah, hopefully this will be the next Charles Dickens that I read. At 813 pages, I have Martutene. I'm positive I'm not saying that correctly. This is a novel out of Basque, and it tells the story of a gynecologist and a neurosurgeon and living what is at the time their sort of boring, mundane, rote life, and what happens when an American sociologist comes in and stirs things up. Okay, so in all honesty, the rest of the alphabet, this is where it starts to fall apart, and I could use your help to fill in some of the gaps. But I'll go with as much as I can, and I'll let you know when I'm either referring back to something off of last year's list or have nothing at all. For the letter N, however, I do have a selection, and that is The Newcomes. This is by William Makepeace Thackeray. And yeah, I was really surprised to find this edition in a store. This book comes in at 801 pages and tells the story of, I believe, a retired officer who returns to England during Victorian times and finds himself just very disgusted by how people are living there. It will be really interesting to see how all of that plays out, given that a lot of people nowadays don't even like a lot of the Victorian morals and may not, and also may not like what he was doing as an officer in the Indian Army. So we'll see how that all comes together. For the letter O, I didn't have a book that was on my shelves, but I do have one that's on my TBR, and that would be Orley Farm by Anthony Trollope. Again, another standalone novel by him. I don't know if I'll ever get to this one because I'm still on the fence as to whether or not Anthony Trollope is someone who I want to read, but I am realizing I do need to look more at his standalone novels. This is one that I find very intriguing because I believe it was Anthony Trollope's favorite work. And also, George Orwell said that he thought it was the greatest example of a lawsuit within a story. So that's fascinating. For the letter P, I go back to my shelf with Priory of the Orange Tree. This is epic high fantasy at its greatest, and this edition comes in at 830 pages. This is a book that I feel like has been all over BookTube, is very famous for its orange cover and its covers in general. There is a prequel, and I believe there's a sequel that's coming out sometime soon. I could be wrong about that. Other than that, I don't know a lot about this book other than people wanted more of the witches, whatever that means. For the letter Q, I again have to go back to my TBR wish list, and for that I'm going to go with the Quincunx. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but you'll see the picture of the book up here on the screen. This is a book that I've seen over the years, and I think I actually read back in high school, but it came back into my awareness more recently because I had someone actually recommend it to me. And the plot of this book is something that I do find intriguing because it is supposed to be written in the Victorian tradition. Not really sure what that means, but I'm guessing in some manner the writing style. And then it's also a plot within a plot within a plot within a plot. And I love embedded narratives and all things of that nature. So I am excited to read this book. Coming in at 1,060 pages is Raintree County. This is also a book that's been on my TBR list for quite a while and seems like it's recently been brought back into print. And yeah, I am looking forward to checking this out. I've heard it's a really great story, and as it says on the back, it's about American journalism, patriotism, a star-crossed love affair from 100 years ago. All right, I'm here for it. It's been on my TBR for so long, I don't quite recall what it was about this plot that intrigued me. So, and the back of the book really doesn't give much of a description of the book at all. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting into it and learning more about what this book is really about. At this point, my books are so scattered right here, I'm not even sure that they're in alphabetical order anymore, so editing me will have to fix that. But for the letter S, I have the Strudelhof Steps. This is a book that's also been on my TBR for a while and then has started creeping up more and more after hearing another booktuber review it and talk about how much he liked this book and the works of this author in general. Right around 875 pages, I have This Thing of Darkness, and like my title's wearing off, I bought this book used. But it takes place in 1828 and tells the story of the naval officer who is the captain of the Beagle and a young trainee cleric and amateur geologist named Charles Darwin that comes on board. It discusses their friendship and then their falling out. And yeah, I'm very curious about that, and this book gets really good reviews. So a little adventure story on the sea sounds good to me. That rhymed. I do not have a book for you at all, so here's your chance to help me out. If you have some recommendations for books that are over 800 pages long and title starts with the letter U, not including articles like the, a, and that kind of thing, leave it in the comments below and I will add that to my TBR. For the letter V, I had Vanity Fair on my list last year, and that's still the only book that I have that's a Mammoth book that starts with the letter V. So I do have one again off my TBR wish list, and that would be Varney the Vampire. I don't recall what this book is about, but I've seen more and more people reading it, and that gets me excited because I don't want to watch their descriptions of the book or their book reviews because I hate spoilers. And yeah, I add books onto my TBR that at some point I've heard something about, and then I refuse to look at the descriptions of them ever again until I've like bought the book and I'm about to read it. So that's why for some of these books on my wish list, I'm like, no idea what it's about, but I still want to read it. Or some of the books that I own. If I've owned them long enough, I forget what they're about and I don't remind myself. Let me know if you're like that, because I'm definitely like that. But Varney the Vampire would be my choice for the letter V. Coming in at this copy is just under 800 pages, but depending on your copy, which will look exactly like this, it may be over 800 pages. And generally, this book is over 800 pages, so I'm going to count it, would be The Water Margin Outlaws of the Marsh. This is considered one of the four great works of of classic Chinese literature, and it is compared to Robin Hood and His Merry Men. So I'm assuming they're the outlaws, but they're in a marsh instead of Sherwood Forest, and obviously they're in China. I am very fascinated by that comparison and the story. I'm hoping it's episodic, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting and reading more Chinese literature, and this may be the next one that I pick up. Of course, there's the Golden Lotus, and that sounds rather fascinating as well. Guess we'll see. For the letter X, last year I had XX on the list, but didn't actually own it. I do own it now. It's still the only book that is over 800 pages whose title starts with the letter X, so I'm going to continue to count that one. But again, if you know of another book listed in the description box below, I did have some people recommend Xenogenesis by Octavia E. Butler, which sounds fascinating, but I can't figure out whether or not that was actually intended to be one book or if it's actually a series. So if you know, let me know in the comments below so that I can officially add that onto this list. For the letter Y, same thing. It's the same book as last year, which is You Shall Not Kill. And so you can go and see last year's video if you want more of a description of that. Again, let me know in the comments if you have a book for that. And then finally, for the letter Z, I have a book that was recommended to me in last year's comments, and that is Zettel's Traum. Is that what it is? I don't have it in front of me, but because I don't own it yet, but I will put the name of the book on the screen. And I believe in English, it's like Somebody's Bottom is the name of the book. And if I'm thinking of the right one, all I recall of this book is that some people own an edition of it, and it's this gigantic copy. So it's not just a very long book, it's also literally a large book. Um, I hope that's the right book that I'm thinking of. But anyway, yeah, you can go and check out somebody else's review of that. That's just been added onto my TBR just for the letter Z. I also had people mention Zibaldoni, I believe it is, which is like a collection of a whole bunch of different thoughts into a story, or maybe it's nonfiction. I don't remember. But the name of all of these books will be in my description box, as well as their authors. So if you want to go look them up and get better descriptions of what some of these books are about, you can do so. And yeah, hopefully this is a helpful video if, like me, you like really long books. It gives you some ideas of other books to look up. Or if you're participating in March of the Mammoths this year, which I haven't seen an announcement video for, but I'm doing anyway. And that's a month where you at least start books that are over 800 pages long, then this may be a helpful list of books to give you some ideas and get you going. So that's it for me today. I guess I need to go play my TBR game to see which ones I'm going to pick. And so you can subscribe to my channel if you want to see me read some of these books in March, and I will talk to you next time. I've heard it's a pretty good, like, more modern writing of like The Lord of the Rings, or people who are fans of the Wheel of the Wheel of the Turn. What is it called? I read the first book. The Eye of the Wheel? That doesn't sound right.